Neptune looks peaceful from the outside, and that is exactly the problem. That blue surface, that smooth and distant sphere at the edge of the dark, is not calm. It is a cover, and what is underneath it breaks nearly every model scientists use to understand how planets work. Peak winds at 1,305 miles per hour, a heat source with no confirmed explanation, a magnetic field tilted impossibly from its axis, a moon already locked into a death spiral it cannot escape. None of it is visible from the outside. All of it has been running for billions of years. One spacecraft, 12 years to arrive, 6 hours of data, 35 years of unresolved consequences. Most people think Neptune is terrifying because it is far away. That is not why. By the end of this, you will understand why the scientists who study it do not call it mysterious or extreme or alien. They call it broken. The first assumption about Neptune is reasonable. It sits 2.8 billion miles from the Sun. At that distance, sunlight arrives 900 times weaker than on Earth. The Sun from Neptune's surface is not a star you can feel. It is a point of light, barely brighter than everything around it. So Neptune should be passive, frozen, a gas shell sitting in thermal equilibrium within near zero temperatures of deep space. That assumption is wrong. Neptune radiates 2.6 times more energy than it receives from the Sun. It is generating heat from its own interior, not a small excess, more than double what any external source could explain. The first explanation scientists reach for is primordial heat, energy left over from Neptune's formation 4.5 billion years ago, slowly leaking outward. A process that should be winding down by now, but perhaps has not stopped. That explanation almost works, except for one problem: Uranus. Uranus and Neptune are near identical planets, same size, same distance class from the Sun, same basic composition, same formation history as far as we can determine. By every model we have, they should behave the same way. Uranus releases no significant excess heat. It is exactly as cold as it should be. Neptune is not. And here is why that single comparison matters so much. If Neptune was simply running hot because of some generic leftover energy, Uranus would show the same thing. It does not. That means the primordial heat explanation is not wrong because the math is slightly off. It is wrong in principle. Something structurally different happened inside Neptune, or is still happening inside Neptune, that never occurred in Uranus. Two planets formed from the same material, in the same region of the same solar system, and one of them is behaving in a way the other is not. The model that was supposed to explain both of them explains only one. Neptune is not just hotter than expected, it is incompatible with the models built to explain it, and those same models are what scientists use to predict everything else about how the planet behaves. Once the heat does not fit, nothing downstream fits either. Consider what that actually means. Planetary science builds models by finding patterns across multiple worlds and testing them against each other. When a model works on Earth, Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, it earns confidence. Scientists apply it to new worlds expecting it to hold. Neptune breaks that confidence entirely. It is not an outlier at the edge of a distribution. It is a data point that sits outside the distribution. And because we have visited Neptune exactly once, for 6 hours, there is no additional data to refine the model against. The failure stands uncorrected. There is a second dimension to this that rarely gets discussed. Ice giants like Neptune and Uranus are actually the most common type of planet found orbiting other stars. They are not rare exotic objects. They appear to be the default outcome of planet formation across the galaxy. If our model for how ice giants work fails on the only one we have ever visited closely, it means our model for the most common planet type in the universe is broken. Every observation of a distant ice giant, every inference made about what is happening inside them, rests on a framework that Neptune has already invalidated. Which brings the first compounding problem. When you add unexplained internal heat source to an atmosphere at the edge of the solar system, where there is no land, no friction, nothing to slow anything down, the heat does not just warm the planet, it drives winds, and what those winds look like is the first sign that something inside Neptune is operating far outside the range of anything we have seen elsewhere. Wind on Earth is driven by the sun. Uneven solar heating creates pressure differences in the atmosphere, and those differences generate airflow. The more energy the sun puts in, the more violent the weather system. Neptune receives almost none of that solar input. By the same model that explains Earth's weather, Neptune's atmosphere should be close to steel, cold, thin, barely circulating. Peak measured wind speeds on Neptune reach 1,304 miles per hour, faster than the speed of sound, faster than any wind recorded anywhere else in the solar system. And they are not a localized event, they are the persistent atmospheric state of the planet. The energy driving those winds is not coming from the sun, it is coming from that unexplained interior. And here is where the constraint closes. If the winds at the surface are that violent, the engine producing them beneath must be proportionally worse. You are not looking at a weather pattern, you are seeing the surface level output of something far larger operating below. The atmosphere is not the problem, it is the symptom, and treating a symptom without reaching the source changes nothing. To understand how severe this is, consider the comparison directly. Earth's most powerful hurricanes produce sustained winds around 155 miles per hour. Those storms are considered catastrophic. They last days before dissipating. Neptune's winds are not a storm, they are the baseline. What would be a civilization-ending event on Earth is simply Tuesday on Neptune, and unlike a hurricane, these winds have no season, no endpoint, and no mechanism that slows them down. In 1989, Voyager 2 photographed a storm embedded in those winds the size of Earth. Scientists called it the Great Dark Spot, a rotating system large enough to swallow our entire planet. They assumed it would persist, the way Jupiter's Great Red Spot has persisted for centuries. When the Hubble telescope looked at Neptune in 1994, the storm was gone. Not weakened, not shifted, gone. A new one formed years later in a different location, with no warning. Neptune's storms are not weather events. They are signatures of something cycling through the interior, appearing at the surface and vanishing when the interior conditions shift. The mechanism is not understood. Every model that tries to explain the winds must first explain the heat, and the heat is the one thing no model has agreed on in 35 years. Think about what the disappearing storm actually means. Jupiter's Great Red Spot has been tracked continuously for over 350 years. It is enormous, persistent, and predictable enough that planetary scientists use it as a reference point. Neptune's equivalent vanished between two observations separated by 5 years. That is not a storm that ended. That is a system that operates on a cycle we have not witnessed enough of to understand. We caught one frame of a process that may run across centuries. We do not know where it is in that cycle right now. That is the first closed loop. The surface cannot be understood without the interior, and the interior is exactly where this gets worse. Not just in terms of what is happening down there, in terms of what happens to anything we send to find it. Assume you wanted to answer the heat question directly. Send a probe into Neptune's atmosphere, push through the cloud layers, and measure what is happening below. Here is what that probe encounters. Within the first few hundred kilometers, pressure climbs past the operational limit of any vessel ever launched. The atmosphere transitions into a dense, superheated fluid of water, ammonia, and methane compressed beyond the point where liquid and gas are meaningfully different. The temperature reaches thousands of degrees Celsius. The pressure reaches millions of times that of Earth's surface. There is no material on Earth that survives long enough to matter. pressures millions of times greater than Earth's surface, temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. Nothing survives, nothing transmits, nothing returns. But here is the detail that compounds everything. Under those pressures, the methane in that fluid does not remain methane. Carbon atoms are stripped from their hydrogen bonds by the sheer force of compression. They are crushed into crystalline lattices. Entire chemical reactions condense into solid structure mid-fluid. They become diamonds, and they fall. Researchers at the SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory confirmed this process in 2017 by replicating Neptune-like pressures in laboratory conditions and observing diamond formation in real time. Those diamonds descend for thousands of kilometers through a scorching interior toward a core where temperatures exceed 9,032 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the surface of the sun, and dissolve into a carbon-saturated liquid sea. This is the region generating the heat. This is what is driving the winds. This is what is producing effects visible across the entire planet. And nothing we build reaches it. That diamond ocean is not just a curiosity. It is evidence of a class of physical process that only exists under conditions no surface laboratory can fully replicate. When researchers at SLAC compressed hydrocarbons to Neptune-like pressures, they observed diamond formation briefly, in microscopic quantities, at the edge of what their equipment could sustain. Neptune does this continuously, at planetary scale, across thousands of miles of interior. The experiment confirms the process exists. It says nothing about what that process is doing to the heat budget, the circulation, or the core over geological timescales. What it does confirm is that the interior of Neptune is chemically active in ways that have no parallel anywhere accessible to us. The material down there is not behaving like gas, not like liquid, not like solid. It exists in states that our standard categories do not adequately describe. And every inference we make about what is happening at the core is built on models that have never been tested at those pressures, those temperatures, or those timescales. The heat source that explains everything about Neptune's behavior sits behind a pressure threshold that destroys instrumentation before it arrives. The answer exists. It is simply located somewhere physically enforced against access, which would be a solvable problem if we had another way in. We do not, and the reason we do not goes beyond physical access. Even the tools designed to read a planet from the outside, without ever entering it, stop working on Neptune. Every planet with a magnetic field generates it through the same mechanism. A conducting fluid at the core rotates with the planet and produces a dipole field. Two poles, aligned with the rotation axis, predictable, readable, the same process on Earth, Jupiter, and Saturn. Scientists use this field as a remote sensing tool, measure the field from outside, model its structure, infer what is happening in the interior without physically going there. Neptune's magnetic field is tilted 47 degrees from its rotation axis and does not pass through the center of the planet. As Neptune rotates, the field does not rotate cleanly with it. It sweeps outward in a chaotic spiral, beyond the reach of our models. The magnetosphere shifts shape constantly. Auroras appear not at the poles but almost anywhere on the planet depending on the moment. The field is not being generated by the core. It is almost certainly being generated by that same conducting fluid layer in the mid-mantle, the same region where diamonds are forming, the same region no probe survives. And this is the second wall. The interior of Neptune is doubly inaccessible, once by pressure, which destroys anything sent in, once by the magnetic field, which is so distorted that the standard models for reading it from outside return results that are internally inconsistent. We had one tool for understanding Neptune's interior without going there. That tool does not work on Neptune. And this closes something important. When scientists plan a mission to a planet they cannot land on or descend into, the magnetic field is how they read the interior from orbit. It is what the Juno spacecraft does at Jupiter right now, mapping the field from space to model what is happening thousands of kilometers below. That approach works because Jupiter's field is structured, stable, and interpretable. Neptune's field shifts with every rotation. A Juno-style mission at Neptune would return data that the existing models have no framework to process. The interior remains unreadable not just because we have not sent the right mission, it is unreadable because the analytical tools that would make such a mission useful do not yet exist. It is worth pausing on that. The standard path for studying a gas or ice giant without landing involves 3 steps. Build the mission, send it into orbit, read the magnetic field. Neptune breaks step 3. The data comes back and the models cannot interpret it, which means step 2, sending the mission at all, has limited value until the models are rebuilt from the ground up. And rebuilding the models requires data that only the mission can provide. That is a closed loop with no obvious entry point. So what do we actually know about what is happening inside? Less than we knew before Voyager 2 arrived. Before 1989, the models seemed to hold. After 6 hours of data, they did not. That is where things stand. And then there is the moon, the one that does not orbit the right way, the one that has been falling toward Neptune since the moment it arrived, and the one that cannot stop. Neptune has 16 known moons, all but one orbits in the same direction the planet rotates. Triton orbits backward. That single fact has one explanation. Triton did not form here. It was a free body in the Kuiper Belt, the region of icy objects beyond Neptune's orbit, captured by Neptune's gravity at some point in the early solar system. The capture restructured everything. Triton's original path was chaotic and elliptical. Tidal interactions over millions of years gradually circularized the orbit. That process bled energy into the surrounding system. Several of Neptune's smaller original moons were likely ejected entirely. What that means is that Neptune's current moon system is not the one it was born with. Triton's arrival erased it. The moons that formed alongside Neptune in the early solar system were destabilized by the energy transfer during Triton's capture and flung outward into space. What orbits Neptune today is the aftermath of a violent reorganization that happened billions of years ago. Triton did not join a stable system, it replaced one. What remained was a tidally locked moon in a stable orbit. Stable, but decaying. Because Triton orbits backward, tidal forces work in reverse. For a normal moon, tidal interaction transfers energy outward, slowly pushing the moon away from its planet. That is why Earth's moon is gradually retreating from us at about 1.5 inches per year. For Triton, the transfer runs the other direction. Every orbit, Triton loses a fraction of its orbital energy. Every orbit, it falls slightly closer to Neptune. The rate is slow by human standards, immovable by any other standard. There is no event that reverses this. There is no gravitational interaction that could push Triton back outward. No collision, no passing body, no orbital resonance has the geometry to undo what the tidal drain is doing. The physics are straightforward and the outcome is fixed. What changes is only the timeline. In approximately 3.6 billion years, Triton will cross the Roche limit, the boundary at which Neptune's tidal gravity exceeds the structural forces holding Triton together. At that point, Neptune dismantles it. What was once a captured moon becomes a debris field, a ring system, shattered remnants encircling the planet. This is not a prediction, it is a trajectory already in progress. Right now, on Triton's surface, at 391 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, just 38 degrees above absolute zero, geysers of nitrogen are erupting. Active geology on a moon geologically condemned since capture. The countdown started billions of years ago. It has not stopped. Here is what Neptune actually is. A planet with an internal heat source no model has explained, driving winds faster than sound through an atmosphere that should be still. The source sits behind pressures that destroy any probe before it arrives. The magnetic field, the one remote tool available for reading the interior, is so distorted it produces results no standard model can interpret. And orbiting the planet is a captured moon that has been in structural decay since the moment Neptune caught it. None of these are separate problems. The heat drives the winds expose the interior as the source. The interior is what generates the broken magnetic field. The broken magnetic field is what closes off the last method for reading the interior from outside. And Triton is what Neptune does to everything that gets close enough, given enough time. Each piece eliminates a solution the previous piece seemed to offer. Distance explains our 1 6-hour glimpse, nothing else. The problem is that every mechanism that makes Neptune what it is operates below the depth of any instrument we can build, behind a magnetic field our models cannot read, in an interior where the pressure enforces its own inaccessibility. And the only planet in the solar system that behaves this way is the one we have seen for 6 hours. The mechanism is still running.